Lately, I've been having trouble sleeping, and it's been giving me problems. The other night, I tossed and turned in bed for hours, just staring at the ceiling. Every moment stretched out into the next indistinguishable moment. My mind was filled with a jittery, searching sort of energy, so I got up and paced the room, pushing out against the walls. And eventually, I just threw open the front door, walked out into the empty neighborhood street, and started running. Outside, I found myself again in that state of searching, trying to remember what it was I was looking for. Then I realized that I was looking for my daughter, who was not in her bed and nowhere to be found. I headed toward her elementary school a couple of miles away and ran through city blocks lined with boarded-up storefronts and yellow police tape. But when I got to where the school was supposed to be, at the spot where I've picked her up hundreds of times, I froze. The school was not there. The entire building had vanished. There was a stranger standing in front of the empty lot where the school once stood, wearing a black plastic bag tied over his torso and a mask. He moved towards me and he said, "Hey man, how have you been?" I stared at him blankly. He said something about being an old friend, but I didn't recognize him at all. His eyes were shrouded in a kind of weird, pixelated fog. I couldn't understand what he was saying, so I just left him there. I think he started shouting after me, but I felt this urgency to get home, to see whether my daughter had returned. I also felt really foolish running around the streets like that. Foolish enough that it made complete sense to me when a police car started following me. The police car trailed silently behind me for a few city blocks, never turning on its flashing lights, never announcing itself, until the vehicle finally drove off without warning. I was relieved the car was gone, but slowly I realized I was lost in my own neighborhood. The street names were totally unfamiliar. The lights had a different hue about them, and the dark silhouettes of the foothill mountains, always framing our lives from a distance, felt so close that I imagined they were collapsing in on me. Even the smell of the street jasmine, which perfumes everything in the spring, was missing. The entire world was silent, except for the yelps and the whines of stray dogs that were openly roaming the abandoned streets, like the feral animals I used to see in Mexico City. My sense of direction had shifted imperceptibly, but enough that my mind could not make sense of the opaque traces around me. But then I saw a building with its lights on, glowing like a lighthouse. It was the neighborhood cafe just down the street from my home. For some reason, it was still open. I walked up to the pane glass window and felt a shock run through me. A woman I had loved deeply many years ago was sitting inside at a cafe table right in front of me, more luminous than I remembered. For a long moment we stared at each other through the glass, in a stunned silence. All of the years that had passed between us, all of the heat, friction, and heartache, fired through that glass like a circuit. But then the gaze was broken for some reason, and the moment was left unexplored, suspended in tangled patterns in my peripheral vision. I rushed from the cafe toward my home, just up the street. I remember thinking that I would, of course, find my daughter safe in her bed, and we would laugh together about how she had been there the whole time. I walked up the stairs towards the front door and looked through the front window into the living room. The lights were all on, the house full of noise, but the noise was from some other family inside. Another father, another mother, other children. Complete strangers laughing at my dinner table. I was too tired to be shocked. I walked around the back, like a zombie and climbed in through the rear window that I always left open. And I found yet another stranger sleeping in my bed. I was indifferent and crawled into the bed anyway, with the stranger under my sheets. As tired as I was, I still couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning for hours, staring at the ceiling. Each moment stretched out into the next indistinguishable moment. I got up and paced, pushing out against the walls, and finally, I threw open the front door, walked out into the empty streets, and started running.